Hello, my name is Angel, and normally I upload reviews about sewing patterns from my slightly beginner point of view. I still consider myself a beginner. I might be more like a maybe an advanced beginner. There's still a lot of stuff that I don't know, but you know, I take my time and somehow I get through the patterns, and then I let you guys know how do I feel about it and if another beginner could do it reasonably. So I thought that today would be a perfect day for me to do a video on my sewing tips for if you're trying to get into sewing. So tip number one, and this applies to me making this video and the way I speak, it applies to a lot of stuff, but go slowly. Go slowly. Take your time. It's okay to slow down. One, because if you're trying to go quickly, you make mistakes. And that can be literally like if you're not used to sewing and you just got your foot on the little pedal and you're just like, phew! You know, your lines aren't going to be straight. You know, you might make mistakes. You're going to have to end up unpicking your unpicking your fabric, and that's annoying. So just slow down, take your time. And I think that applies to the whole life of your project as well. So really take the time to think about, for example, when you're buying your pattern, like, is this a pattern that I think I'm going to wear often? Is this something that I actually need for my closet, or am I making it because I just saw it on Instagram and everybody's wearing it, or it's new? Do I want to get this pattern because there's a new technique that I want to learn? Like, does it have a zipper? I've never done a zipper before. Does it have, I don't know, like inseam pockets? I've never done inseam pockets before. You know, just take your time to think through your steps. They also say, like, on your patterns to read your instructions all the way through. And then this also applies to while you're constructing your pattern. You're not going to really enjoy the process if you're speeding through it. So I understand it's like sometimes you just want to get to the end of your project so that you can put on what you made and be like, yes, I did it. But there really is joy in the journey and not just in the completed outcome, not just in the outcome. So slow down and enjoy your project. Each step of your project from start to finish, really try to connect with that process. And I think that you will have like a much more pleasurable experience, and you'll have a little bit more of a connection to the item that you actually make because you really took the time to enjoy it and focus on it. Number two, think about your fabric. Like, I want this pattern in this fabric. Does this fabric match this pattern? Is this fabric something that I actually like? Do I like this pattern for real? Like, on a fabric? Do I like pattern fabrics? Like, for example, I love this fabric. This fabric right here. It's a quilting cotton. It's a quilting cotton, but I loved the print. I didn't care that it was a quilting cotton. I was like, I'm gonna make something out of this print, right? And then because I loved it so much, I wear this thing all the time. You know, like, think about how the fabric is going to go with the pattern that you're making. Another thing, like, I like to do, you know, just touch all the fabrics. I like to touch the fabrics, the silky fabrics, the slubby fabrics. I love slubby fabrics. And I've also discovered like what fabrics that I tend to enjoy more than others. So, you know, think about your fabrics, think about how it's going to match your pattern, think about if it goes with other things in your closet. Slow down on buying the fabric. I saw a meme where they were like, oh, buying fabric and sewing fabric are two separate hobbies. And it can be. It really can be. So be careful with that. Think about your fabric. 3, make a practice version. Listen, sometimes we hate it. You can make a wearable practice. You can make a wearable practice version, but it is important to do a practice version. Sometimes you'll have a pattern and it's going to need adjustments. And that's the beauty about being able to sew your own clothes, is that you can adjust it to fit your body and not have to wear it and have it be off. You can do what you want, you know? So I would suggest making a practice version and learning how to make those simple alterations to patterns so that you can get the best fit for your body, so that everything looks as you would want it to look when you're wearing it. This is something that I also need to work on myself. Sometimes I'm just like, oh, I don't really feel like making a practice version. I'll make the pattern and then I'll be like, I really wish I had, because I could have corrected some like little minor fit issues here and there. And while it might not be bad per se, it could have been better. And then you have to live with that lingering regret in your soul, like it could have been better. And we don't want that. No regrets, or, as little as possible. Number 4, I kind of touched on this in number 2, but think quality over quantity when it comes to your pieces. I kind of feel like, especially on, like when you're looking like on social media, there's a lot of quantity in terms of sewing. And sewing to me, sewing is an expensive hobby, and it's so labor intensive that I'm not sure I would want to fall into the habit of making a ton of things and churning out stuff all the time, especially just for me to like upload it to my social media and then turning around and looking in my closet and realizing I have all this stuff and no time to wear the majority of it, So for all of that, you probably could have I'm not going to advocate for fast fashion or anything. I'm not going to get into that argument, but it's like, it can sometimes seem as though sewing is becoming like the new fast fashion in a way. It's just that you're overworking yourself. And if you want to sew a ton of stuff, that's just, look, do what you want. I can't tell you what to do. You know what I'm saying? Like, do what you want. But I like to, for me, I would say think quality over quantity. When you're making your projects, go slow, give it your full attention, do the best work that you can do, even if it's a little bit slower, and really think about the pieces that you're making and adding to your wardrobe or your collection. I don't know. That's how I function with my sewing. I can't tell anybody to function like that too, but I feel like I get a lot more joy and wear out of the things that I do make because I really take my time to enjoy the process of making them and make things that I actually enjoy wearing, so that by the time I make it, I pretty much live in the stuff that I make. And if I had a whole ton of stuff, I don't know how I'd give a chance to give every bit of my wardrobe the love that it deserves. So I think about that. I encourage you to think about that. But once again, do what you want. Number 5, read through your instructions before you start your project and make sure you have all of the materials that you need on hand nearby before you start. Because I guarantee you, when you start your project and then you're like halfway through and you're like, oh crap, I don't have thread. Or you're like, oh boo, I don't have whatever it is that you don't have that you actually need. It's annoying because then you have to stop what you're doing, go over to the store, pick it up, then come back and then try and get into the flow again. So just make sure you have everything on hand, know where all your buttons and things are, because I had a dress. I just finally finished it up where I made a dress. I made another one of these, but I did not have the buttons for the dress before I made it. So that dress sat unfinished for months on my table because I didn't have buttons. And that could have been avoided because if I had the buttons, I would have just put them on right away and would have been able to start wearing the dress right away. So make sure you have everything you need. Read through your instructions. That's very important. Sometimes you might think that you know how the construction is going, but every brand does things differently, and you don't have to do it the way that they do it. I mean, if you're a pro, do your thing, but so that there's no surprises, or so that you can understand why they're doing something the way that they're doing it, even though you wouldn't have done it in this particular order. It's probably best to just read the instructions through at least once, make sure you understand it, kind of get a little note of where things might get a little tricky so you know what you're going to look it up and go from there. Number 6, wash your fabric. I'm not gonna lie to you and say that I wash my fabric all the time before I sew my projects. Especially with oversized stuff, I don't wash my fabric first. Oop. But general best practice is that you should wash your fabric in the way that you plan on caring for it after you finish your project before you start your project. So that means wash it. If you're gonna dry it. Iron that bad boy if it's like cotton or something so it's not wrinkled, and then cut it. The reason why you should do this is because once you wash your fabric, it might shrink. So that's why they say when you're buying fabric, a lot for shrinkage. I'm not gonna lie, sometimes I don't always do this, especially if it's like something that's oversized, because most times if it's oversized, like the amount of shrinkage isn't going to affect me, or because the way that I don't always put things in a dryer either, so I don't really end up having to worry about that. Well, in my head, it always works out fine, but you should be doing it. Number 7, don't cut, I don't know why I'm doing that. Don't cut corners. And what I mean by don't cut corners is don't skip over the small things that you might not think are important. So always press your seams. The finished product will look different. Like, make sure you properly finish your seams. Go slowly when you're doing like your hemming or measuring, doing your top stitching. All of those little things that might seem tedious, take your time, because I guarantee you, once you finish your project, all those little things add up, and that's going to be the difference between like a piece that you love and one that's just like, I could have done better. And I really, really, really feel like there's nothing worse than finishing a project and you know you cut the corners, you know you didn't do this here because you're like, oh, I'm too lazy, I don't feel like doing this, it's tedious. You finish your project and then you're like, you know what, I could have done better. I don't like that feeling. I don't want you to have that feeling. If you could have done better, just do better while you're doing it. Take your time, slow down. Don't cut corners. Number 8. Clean your machine. Yes, routinely, please. Clean your machine, get rid of all that dust, get rid of all that gunk, take out the piece, you know, you clean out your bobbin, replace your needles. Oh, don't forget to replace your needles. Like, keep a sharp needle on there, all right? That's also like, use the proper tools, use your proper needles, but whatever. But, you know, make sure that your machine is clean so that you don't have any mishaps, your thread isn't skipping and getting stuck. A clean machine does wonders. Number 9, don't leave your projects unfinished for too long. I'm so guilty of this, and that's why this is on this list, because going back to finish works in progress, works in progress. Going back to finish like your works that are in progress can be so annoying, because sometimes I'll be like, yo, why did I use this fabric? Or you might not remember all of the pieces, or if you didn't keep the pieces, like the fabric with the actual pattern cut out, you're like, you have to figure out what's going on. You know, things can get lost, or even worse, they'll go unfinished for months and months and months. Like, if you cut it, go ahead and try to start that project. You know, sometimes you do want to cut things and then it just can't get done right away, but try not to leave your projects unfinished, because I feel like the longer you leave them unfinished, the less likely you are to go back to them. And we don't want that. Your project feels lonely. Do your projects. Another tip I have, I think this is number 10. So my 10th tip for you is take breaks. Feel free to take a break. If something is frustrating you or you can't get it, sleep on it. I'm one of those people where if I have something that I just cannot get, I just can't get it. I'm trying, I can't figure it out. If I take a nap, I guarantee you by the time I wake up, I'll have a solution. I'll be like, I know exactly what I'm supposed to do. Like, in my head, I'll just be thinking about it while I'm sleeping, I guess. I don't know. But the answer will come. And sometimes, you know, you're working on something, and if it's a long project, you start kind of feeling like negative towards it, like, oh, this is taking so long. So just step away. Feel free to step away. Not step away and turn your project into something that's never going to get finished, but, you know, just feel free to like take a break. Just, it's okay. It's totally cool. It's also good to take breaks like while you're sewing. I don't know. I can't sew for more than like an hour or two without feeling like, all right, I need to step away and do something else. But that's just me. All right. So my next tip, number 11, and this is going to be my last one because I feel like I've been running my mouth. But my tip is don't create a huge fabric stash. I think I mentioned this earlier in the video. Buying fabric and using fabric can be two separate hobbies if you're not careful. I have a fabric stash and I don't like it because it takes up space. And because for me, a lot of the times when I started buying some fabric, I had a project in mind, but the Angel that had a project in mind and bought the fabric did not leave any notes for the Angel that would actually have to use the fabric. And that's a problem, because now I'm like, well, what was I going to make with this fabric? And then I'll use it for something completely different. But also because, why do you need a fabric stash? Like the fabric, there's a fabric stores all over the place. Like, why are we hoarding fabric? So my goal actually for this year is to not buy any fabric. I tried starting this last year. There was a girl on Instagram. I'll have to insert her name over here because I don't remember it. A 30-yard fabric challenge. I don't know what it was called. I'll put it up here too. And the idea was that you have to use 30 yards of fabric from your stash before you can buy any new fabric. And if you bought any new fabric before you finish that 30 yards, it resets. You have to start again. So I thought that was cool. I would love to sew through my whole fabric stash. The problem is I have to actually sew, but I have committed to not buying any new fabric. And this is the first time I'm saying this, and I'm saying it on camera now, so hold me accountable. But I'm not buying any new fabric. I'm going to keep a tally of how much fabric that I use over the course of the next couple of months and this year, and I'll keep you guys updated and let you know how that's going along. My only thing is that I might need to buy, I don't stash like lining, so I'm not going to count that because I do have a couple of jackets that I have on my list that I'm going to make like coats, so I will need lining. But other than that, or notions, I'm not buying any new fabric. And if I also suggest, like I said earlier, maybe you should not buy new fabric if you have a lot of fabric, or you should avoid creating a stash. It just takes up space. It takes up space. Your poor fabric sits there lonely, just waiting for you to use it. And you're over here just getting ready to use it. And then you find something new, you dart off and get something new. And the fabric is just left behind like, I'm right here. I'm right here. Love me. So not doing it. I think that's it for today. Like I said, I've been talking, blah, 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 running my mouth. So I'm gonna give you guys a break. I do have a part 2 to this video because my list is OD long, but we'll just look, we gotta split it up, all right? We gotta split it up. So if you have any tips that you would give somebody else who's starting out with sewing, or just sewing tips in general, go ahead and drop them in the comments. I will read them. Come back when I post my part 2 for this video if you wanna hear more about what my tips are and what I think, because you're like, hey, you know what, you had some pretty good stuff on there. I know, I tried to think of the list all by myself. So look forward to it. Have a wonderful day or evening or morning, whichever one, wherever you are, whatever time of the day it is, and I'll see you in the next one.